In January 22nd, my life totally changed. That's when my lovely wife, Debbie, of 46 years, she committed suicide. I wasn't in that dark place where it's just nothing but pain. God has healed me from that place that I was at. I started feeling like there's still hope.
God will make way. God always makes way.
I wanted to kind of tell you a little bit about my story. But on January 22nd, my life stopped. I immediately went into grief. Had a real good friend of mine that I taught their teenagers a few years back. And they said, you might want to come to this program called Grief Share. And I went, and it was about all I could do. Probably about the first month was just sit there and cry because I was so into the fact that my wife was not there. And we all were telling our names, and there was this one lady in the group, and she said, my name is Monique, I am unique, and I'm not an antique.
When I look back at my journey, it really starts at the age of 13. That's when I met my first husband, Eric. And at the age of 14, I found myself pregnant. And at the age of 15, I gave birth to our first son. Fast forward, we were together 34 years. And 29 years of marriage. And we had 3 children, and we had grandchildren as well. And so when COVID came out, of course, everybody was worried. Everybody was concerned when COVID came. And everybody had some type of grief that COVID affected them in some way. Whether it be that you were sick and your health is not the same anymore, or whether you lost a loved one as a result of that, or maybe even lost a business. In all of that, we all face grief in some way. For me, we had already had COVID once when it first came out in the fall of 2020. Then it came around again in the summertime, and we got COVID Delta. And so I knew, I had woken up early in that morning, that I needed to take myself to the hospital. My husband was very concerned because he was reading articles where the wives would go off to a hospital and never return. And he was concerned that if I was going to go, he wasn't going to see me again. And before I left, my husband said, I want to pray with you. I want to pray over you for healing and make sure that God would take care of you. And he did, as I was standing at the front door, ready to go ahead and drive myself to the hospital. And he was still at home with COVID. And at that time, he seemed to be okay. We were still communicating and everything seemed to be fine. We just felt really under the weather. 12 hours later, I go to call my husband to check on him. He had said the night before that he wasn't feeling so well, and that was it. Well, I got a phone call that morning, the next day, from the neighbor asking me if everything was okay because an ambulance had come. My husband had called for an ambulance for himself. And unfortunately, as a result of that, when he finally called later, I found out that he literally was crawling to the front door to open up the door for the paramedics. He was dehydrated and many fluids were given to him, and within 72 hours he was gone. There was no way for me to see him or say anything again. While I was in one hospital, he was in another. Our boys were with him and my daughter was with me. And I watched him pass away through FaceTime. Now some people would look at me and go, are you kidding me? That's horrible. And yes, it was horrible. And they'd say, you believe in God? Why would you believe in God? That's so cruel. Why would a loving God do something like that? The reality is I was really grateful for FaceTime because I got to see it. I got to see and say goodbye. I learned that through grief, that God is always there. So I went through 2.5 years of deep grief. You're going to be alone. What am I supposed to do with myself now? And it was very hard because people come around right after the funeral, but then a month or two, nobody comes. And we don't talk about death. Death is uncomfortable. Grief is uncomfortable. Yet we're all going to die. There are over 150 different emotions that come with grief. And through my grief journey, I have had all of those emotions. Here I was 5 months into this new property. I said, all right, I'm going to get to it. Made a quick phone call, looked and see what was on Craigslist, Saw some people selling some chickens, called a lady. Been a week, I had chickens. I thought, well, if I go to a grief share group and I check off all the boxes, then my grief will go away. And so I went to a grief share, and this grief share was different. It was so diversified, and everybody was there for a different reason. Because most of the groups that I had been were just women, older women with white hair. I didn't feel like I fit in that category. How is it possible that my mom was a widow at 49, and here I was also a widow at 49? And so my mom held me through that first 9 months. My mom was also facing death. She had already had cancer and was stage 4 and going through chemo. Then it came time that my mom was going to pass away. And I said, Mom, how do you feel about that? She says, I know where I'm going. My final words with my mom was, hey kid, I'll see you at the turn. I lost my husband. 9 months later, I lost my mom. And unfortunately, more time would come. I would lose my brother-in-law, my father-in-law later as well. And prior to my husband passing, we had lost my uncle. So in a matter of 20 months, I had lost 5 people. And I went to Grief Share and I said, I'm going to be committed. I'm going to finish the classes. And as I looked around, I saw everybody, and I turned, and there was this gentleman there, and he was weeping. He was weeping and weeping in deep, deep sorrow. My heart hurt for him so much. And I said, God, I just want to pick him up. I just want to hold him like a baby. Because I knew that grief. I knew that pain deep in here. That person was Ron Renfro. Fast forward, Ron and I started talking. What people don't realize is you can keep yourself really busy during the day, but when you've lost a loved one, the nights are horrible. The nights are cold and dark, and the silence is eerie.
We texted at 9, we stopped at 2 o'clock that night. In the next 3 weeks, we just kept texting back and forth, which was really neat because she would send me scriptures, she would send me songs, she would send words of encouragement. And so that really got me out of the grief, because at that point, I was just in the point in my grief journey where all I could do is just be in pain because my wife was not there, she was not there, she was not there. I knew she was in heaven with Jesus, but she wasn't with me. And so that kind of got me out of that.
Life without love is a deeper grief than grief itself. And I wasn't interested in a relationship at all. And I really told Ron, like, we shouldn't have a relationship. In fact, you need to run. And he laughed and he said, I'm going to run to you. I'm not going to run away from you. And one day I lost my keys while I was working. My battery was dying. I was like, oh no, so I'm just gonna stay here in the car. And he happened to text and said, hey, it's 10:30 at night. Where are you? And I said, oh, I'm still at the apartment complex I was working on. What are you doing over there late at night? Well, I lost my keys. Well, I'll come rescue you.
Well, I go down. It took us about 45 minutes. And right there on the ground, it was just clear as no grass at all, there was a key. And so I found it. So of course I became the knight in shining armor, rescuing the damsel in distress.
And that was the beginning of the journey of our love story. I love about Ron is, you see, he's an old school gentleman. He's the kind that says, yes ma'am, no ma'am. He opens up the door. He will not let me open up the door at all. He opens the door for me. I said, Lord, I need confirmation that you want this to happen. I want 3 rainbows. Then I know that you want me to go ahead and be with Ron. 3 days later, guess what showed up?
So I go and I get the card and I put on there, I hope that you like this. I'll just draw a rainbow on it. I drew another rainbow. And on the outside I spelled her name, Monique. Drew a 3rd rainbow.
3 rainbows.
And so I would like to share one other thing with you, is the fact that my proposal, this is how God works. I was over at her house and I was like, I wanted to propose to this woman. I just grabbed a tissue and then I started rolling it up, and I don't know why this came to me, but I rolled it up. I made it into like a little ring, a little makeshift ring. I said, Monique, you know, these tissues have been used for, they have been used for many, many things, many for pain and for sadness and sorrow. But from this moment on, I want tissues to be used for joy. Will you marry me?
And so here we are, and now we are engaged to be married.
Talking to her daughter, Marissa, she said, Ron, you know, Mom hadn't laughed in 2.5 years. And now she's laughing. And that just made my heart just so full. 8-9 months ago, I was in a totally different place. I was in grief. I was in a lot of pain, sadness, and sorrow. And how that God has brought me to this place. And I realize it's all God. You need to really hold on to the fact that God still is with you.
And I have seen God do miracles. Well, it was a couple of weeks ago, we were already engaged and we were thinking about postponing the wedding. As a result, his aunt had told him, hey, you better not postpone the wedding. We hadn't told anybody we were thinking about postponing the wedding. He said, no, we're not postponing the wedding. And she says, well, I sure hope not. You need to marry that girl. He had come over in the evening and was going to help me with my chickens. And we happened to go outside and we go, oh, look, there's this big rainbow. But here's the real kicker. It went the first part of the rainbow, a cloud, second part of the rainbow, a cloud, and a third part of the rainbow. You see, it was one rainbow, but in our view, it was 3 rainbows.
And so I want to share with you that don't give up hope. You always have hope. God is with you, and He's continuing with you.
Remember who you are in Christ Jesus, that you are a daughter of the King, and as a daughter of the King, you are royalty. My question is to you, where is Jesus in your life? Because you see, our body is a temple of God. And if you're seeking Christ, He is here within you. But He says, come to me, all you who are broken and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Through my grief journey, as difficult it has been, God has never abandoned me. He has always been there with me. And when I asked God to bring a helper to get out of grief, God sent Ron.
But God is the ultimate. He's the one that makes our plans. So that's what I want to leave you with.
So, together, Ron and I are starting a new ministry for widows and widowers. And our heart and desire is to make sure that widows and widowers are not forgotten, that you're not stuck in grief. And there's many, many things that widowers can do to help the widow as well as to help the young mom. Together, we can make a difference. So, church, I'm asking you, join Ron and I in this love story to continue to see it grow, to see God do big things. We have a big God. Let us not have limitations on ourselves and see what God can do. Come, join us and be a part of what we're doing. Through this love story with the love of the Lord for us and our love for Him, the love and Ron and I have for each other as well as the love we have for you. But also, let us not forget to love on one another, for this is the greatest commandment.
Who on earth can I turn to? I look to you. I look to you. After all